and all members of the Aligarh Muslim University who are sitting here, and ladies and gentlemen. Sir Syed was no ordinary man. And I think that we will not be doing justice to his memory if we talk of Sir Syed only in terms of his education to the minority. He was a giant in terms of his vision about education. He was concerned about the fact that the minority communities were not embracing the culture of education. And therefore they were being deprived of the essentials of education which would take them and allow them to embrace modernity. And in that context, Sir Syed talked about the minority community to which he belonged. But his message to the world was about education. And that was not limited to the Muslim community alone. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi talked about him when he said, he is the prophet of education. And this was not in the context of me being a member of the minority. And the essential message of Sir Syed is that in education, and in the context, remember, of the 19th century, he's saying this in the 19th century, we're in the 21st century. What he's saying is, and at that time the Western world was advancing at a very fast pace, so he said we should embrace the intellectualism of the West and marry it with the traditionalism of the East. In other words, and Ramanaji talked about it, that his sense of how a person should be educated related to the fact that we must not be bound down by tradition and the values that are permeating society at any given point in time. Because values change, modern challenges change, and education must move along with those changes. Therefore, he was a social reformer, he was a leader, he was a religious thinker, he was a moralist, he was a rationalist, he was a humanist, he was a jurist. So what is Sir Syed's message to all of us? Sir Syed's message is that the child must be allowed to grow, and the concepts of education must be allowed to change and not be stratified in processes of thinking which are in constant change. And the problem with education, and this is not just about minorities, and all of us are talking about minorities, the problem of education around the world, and in particularly in India, is that our mindset has not changed. That we are embracing values that stymie the growth of children. And at the heart of education is to have an open mind. When I was the education minister, I used to talk to children and I used to tell them a story, and the story was this. I said, if you are flying or you're in a helicopter and you wanted to actually jump, reach the surface with a parachute, and if you jump and the parachute doesn't open, what happens to you? You We all know what happens. You'll fall down and you'll be injured. But if the parachute opens, it'll be a steady fall and you will land safely. The parachute is your mind. That parachute is your mind. If you keep it open, you land safely. Our minds are closed. We never think about the other. They think about us as the other. And we think about them as the other. That is the tragedy of education in my country. And as I was sitting in my room early in the morning, I happened to write a bit of poetry as well. So early in the morning, I wrote a poem about education and what it should be. And it just blew my mind. This is how it goes. No, I hit this down. Sorry. Why is this not working? Sorry, give me a minute. Thank you. So this is how it goes. In dusty winds, I'm sitting here in Saudi, so I could think about dusty winds. In dusty winds of desert storms, and far away are ice-cold lawns. Desert winds and dusty storms, and far away are ice-cold lawns. Such moods of nature she adorns. The tides that turn, in storms that churn, flowing lava as nature burns. The diversity in nature's lap is real wealth that we all have. Yet humans seek conformity, intolerant to let us be. Suppress the child's inquiring mind, make him go through the textbook grind. Let her explore her curious thoughts, take forward from where we begot. Allow the child to find for us, for if we don't, it is our loss. She must charter another course with diverse views and fresh discourse. This is what education should be. And that's what Sir Syed stood for. When he was talking about the Muslims in that context, he was saying the Muslims and the Hindus are two of my eyes. I look at them as equals and I want them to be equals. But in that thought, the essential element of his thinking was that we must embrace modernity, move away from the ulemas. Pardon myself. In other words, the stratified minds, we do not allow the child to grow and make him absorb himself in cultures which will make him an outsider. Should not be allowed. And this is not just true of the Muslims, it is true of many communities. And Romanaji, there is one data that I saw that's of 2021 data as to how many children are in higher education in India of communities. And the data is as follows. In 2021, here a higher education report, enrollment in higher education, Muslims 4.6%, OBCs 35.8%, SCs 14.2%, STs 5.8%. So the 19th century into the 21st century, there has been no change. This is alarming. This is alarming because the nature of an education system in India destroys the curiosity of the child. And when we talk about the scientific way of thinking, this is how, allow the child to discover for herself, for himself, as to what his environment is. If you give a child a toy which has no angularities to it, he'll get bored with it. If you give a child a toy which allows him to discover, he will find, he will discover. Because he has the inherent curiosity to discover. We've lost that curiosity to discover. We've not allowed our children to discover. You go to a garden and you look at a butterfly. It sits and its wings are closed. And when it flies, the wings are open. You ask a child, take him or her to the butterfly and explain to him or her the aerodynamics of flying. And the child will immediately understand. But you make a child read a book about butterflies and try and explain to him the aerodynamics of flying, she or he will never understand. This is what you mean by a scientific bent of mind. This is how we must look at education, but we never do. And the result is that our children go to school, they are told to read this book, they are told to mark this book, and the next day they are told to write about this book. Then they are set an examination and they say you got 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and the child who gets 9 out of 10 thinks he's superior. This is no way to educate us. This is what Syed stood for. So whether you build an AMU or another AMU or another school, it makes no difference. But unless you change your mindset, unless you change the way you think, unless you allow your child to grow and allow him to discover himself or herself, you will never get an educated person. Why? Because the child has to deal with others. A child is not an isolated person. As we grow up, we have to deal with the rest of the world. And how do we deal with the rest of the world unless we understand the diversity of nature and the diversity of this world? And the reason why we are where we are, because we do not learn from nature. We never learn from nature. And we want to conquer nature. Nature will never allow you to conquer her. That's why the other day I said that, look, whatever solutions you find today, those solutions will have the seeds for a problem tomorrow. Every solution has the seeds for challenges in the future. That's how civilization has run. But we are greedy people. We want to be comfortable in our own lives. We never want to give, we only want to take. This is the sad part. And those who do this are not educated people. We may be literate, we may have degrees, we may have doctorates, but if you distinguish between person and person, this person is of that religion, this person is of that caste, this person is scheduled caste, this person is scheduled tribe, that's not an educated person. The bane of our civilization in India, I know the rest of the world is the same, that we try and look at a person on the basis of what religion he belongs to, what caste he belongs to, tribe he belongs to, what language he speaks. And then we sort of, in our eyes, we think of attributes of that human being related to his dress, the way he speaks. That's an uncultured way of looking at it. That's an uneducated way of looking at human beings. That's one problem with education. The other problem is even more serious. If I'm sitting in a room and the sun is shining, the natural assumption is that when I go out it will be warm. Right? Good. So you make assumptions in life which have nothing to do with reality. You make assumptions about a friend, about your colleague, about a student, without really understanding who or she or he is and what he stands for. And we do it all the time. That's a very uneducated way of looking at things. That's a very uneducated way of actually moving forward in life. Therefore, I say that when you reflect in the context of education, when you look at a child, you start thinking what's good for him or her. A teacher starts thinking what's good for my child. What this child should do instead of trying to look at the world through the child's eyes. This is the problem of we uneducated people do. We always look at others through our eyes, not realizing maybe if we start looking at them and look at ourselves through their eyes, we have a better understanding both of ourselves or of them. Never do that. So we say, become a doctor, become an engineer, become this, become that, because it's your dream and you want your children to justify your dream. The fact of the matter is, he is a child. He wants to discover his own dream. This is what Sir Syed stood for. This is the modernity he was talking about. This is the liberal thinking that he was talking about. This is the science that he was talking about. And so I think we do not do justice to his memory by only talking in terms of Aligarh Muslim University. It's great. I mean, I think that anywhere in the world that I go, and I've been to many parts of the world, Egypt, many parts of the world, and everybody, around there is somebody from Aligarh Muslim University. So I think you should be proud of yourselves. But I think that's not the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is actually what we are doing with our children. And the heart of the problem also is what we are doing with our own society and how we deal with our own society. And again, I will share a poem with you. You don't mind? It's a poem about the march of civilization and why we are where we are. Urdu wala bhi bolte gaya. Wo bhi kehta. Sorry. एक second. It's a poem called The March of Civilization. थोड़ी लंबी है, but आपको अच्छी लगी. Because it mirrors who we are. It says, we thoughtfully use our forks and knives, talk of scandals surrounding lives, of kings and queens of yesteryears who reigned to kill and shed no tears. The trophies of barbaric wars were kingdoms won with wounds and scars, survival was a daily tryst, through loyalty a virtue missed. Quest to conquer, a central theme that underlies us mortals' dreams. FaceTime audio. Even if fateh ho jaye. Palace intrigues, empires lost, aggrandizement at what cost? How else would then kingdoms survive? Not go to war would be naive. Men were fodder in battlefields, triumphs brought home increasing years. War's sources of riches and wealth. These helped enhance the kingdom's health. Victories perceived as acts divine. Wars, commerce of medieval times. Science triumphed, Sir Syed. Science triumphed, discoveries made, new riches sought by pushing trade. Then came engines with steam to roll, commerce and goods grew manifold. Enslaved humans like chattels dealt, empires grew, so did their wealth. Were colonies, stripped them bare, transferred their wealth. Swiftly transformed economies, the source of wealth was colonies, stripped them bare, transferred their wealth with open loot, if not by stealth, which is what the British did. The concept of the nation-state made empire seem out of date. The struggles for freedom were stoked by glorious deeds of simple folk. The unnamed who gave up their lives merged with the crowd who swore to strike. The swelling mass sea of protest burst forth with hope for fresh conquests, broke free to see the midnight sun lit up the sky. Freedom was won. Yet history repeats itself. Through lust, deceit, conquests and wealth. The means perhaps are now unique: insiders trade, corporate intrigue. Seek victories through IPRs, multinationals, contemporary czars. Hackers will use our cyberspace, will launch attacks without a trace. Control markets seek dominance, the surest way to influence. New wave conquests, fresh battlefields. Behind it all is human greed. What we are. And our children should not be what we are. But if our children will be what we are, then the world will be in the trouble that it is. And this should be a message to the rest of the world, that we are all brothers and sisters. And that we have no choice but to live together. And violence and hate, the genders of violence as hate, are no solutions to problems. Dialogue is the only way. Understanding is the only way. And if you don't do that, then even though you may be in power, tomorrow you will lose it. As you know, what goes up comes down. तो ये तालीम की बात है और यही सर सैयद साहब कहते हैं। और हम सोचते हैं कि यूनिवर्सिटी बनाकर हम तालीम में बदलाव ले आए, ऐसा नहीं हो। हमें अपनी सोच बदलनी पड़ेगी, अपना रवैया बदलना पड़ेगा और जो हालात दुनिया में है और हमारे देश में भी, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं, हमें वो रवैया भी बदलना पड़ेगा। और इसमें गलती एक की नहीं है, कई होगी। लेकिन जब हुकूमत ये बात समझती नहीं तो उसमें नुकसान हुकूमत का भी होता है और अपना। देश हमारा है और उस देश को हमने ऐसे रास्ते पे ले जाना है कि 21वीं सदी में दुनिया में ऐसा देश बने कि हमारी मिसाल बने। और ये बहुत जरूरी है। अब मैं उर्दू में, अब हिंदी में सुना देता हूँ, सब आप कह रहे थे। ये तो मैंने कल रमाना जी को सुनाई थी। मंजिल पे पहुंच के करूंगा क्या? मंजिल पे पहुंच के करूंगा क्या? वहां से वापस नहीं आना लाज़मी है। मंजिल पे पहुंच के करूंगा क्या? वहां से वापस नहीं आना लाज़मी है। ऐसा नशा के छोड़कर करूंगा क्या? ऐसा नशा के छोड़कर करूंगा क्या? मैं खाने का दोस्ताना लाज़मी है। ऐसा नशा के छोड़ के करूंगा क्या? मैं खाने का दोस्ताना लाज़मी है। दूर होकर भी बता करूंगा क्या? तेरे शहर में घर बसाना लाज़मी है। तेरे शहर में घर बसाना लाज़मी है। अपना बना के तूने अब ठुकरा दिया, अपना बना के तूने अब ठुकरा दिया, फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाज़मी है। फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाज़मी है। गली गली में ये जो आग लग रही, गली गली में ये जो आग लग रही है, उस आग को हमें बुझाना लाज़मी है। उस आग को हमें बुझाना लाज़मी है। खुदा के वास्ते इस दहशती को छोड़ दे, ये गुलसिता उजाड़ना लाज़मी है। तो ये गुलसिता को हमें बरकरार रखना है, तालीम के साथ रखना है, अपना रवैया बदलना है और ये प्रयास करना है कि उनका भी रवैया थोड़ा बदले। ये देश की लड़ाई है, देश को आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। उसमें हम we are key constituents of that country, of my country, and you are great ambassadors for India. You are, in fact, and I believe this, that every resident of Saudi Arabia belonging to this community is an ambassador of India and loves his or her country as much as we in India. And people should not forget that India is too great a country to be written off. Can never be written off. As long as we have empathy, as long as we strive to do the right thing. Because remember, Sir Syed was also a great moralist. And you know what Nehru said about him? Nehruji said about him that, look, Sir Syed was very concerned about the fact that we are not adopting modern techniques and modern means to move forward. And Nehru said that in the context of that, Sir Syed was very unhappy with traditionalists within the community. And I think those traditionalists are still there. And you sitting here belonging to the liberal traditions of Aligarh Muslim University, where Hindus, Muslims, all of them have been ambassadors of that university. You can inculcate different values, but one thing is very clear that many of you, some of you at least I know of, are actually supporting people at home, try and help them. But I think economic support is one thing, but the more important support is the communication of values. That's very important. I am deeply grateful to you for having invited me here. It has been